So in this Tuesday's edition of Getting to Know Ukraine, we're going to go over some statistics, and then I'm also going to share with you some horrible facts that I just found out that I would like this organization to help with, either to help find a cure or to combat the problem. So first, we're going to go over the statistics. Total population of Ukraine is 42.1 million people. Number of Christians, so there's 35,919 churches and religious organizations. 71% of Ukraine's population declares themselves believers. This is as of 2018. And an average of 70% attend church regularly, which this percentage would mostly be 88% Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox, so similar to Russian, 96% Greek Orthodox, Catholic, and then 89% are non-denominational. Children in Ukraine, the numbers are under 18. 7.6 million children are under the age of 18. Almost 14% of Ukraine's population is age 0 to 14, while 12% is between the ages of 15 and 24, and 57% of the population is between the ages of 25 and 64 years of age. And then there's a smaller percentage of the population, only 15%, that's 65 years and above. That's 42.1 million people, and 14% of them are 0 to 14 years of age. That's a lot of children. So now we're going to get into the estimated numbers of orphans, and based on this research, is 106,000 children live in boarding schools and various types, of which 6,324 children have the status of orphan and can be adopted. Another 64,996 orphans are under guardianship or care of the state. So like I said before, they have families, or they have a parents, maybe grandparents, or maybe an older sibling, but those people aren't able to take care of them because of financial hardships. So there are some, like what we have in the U.S. is mostly foster care. They have some systems like that in Ukraine, but it's relatively small, and there's not a whole lot of government funding that goes towards it. So here's the data. Alternative care in Ukraine. Boarding system, foster families like the U.S., adoption, and the numbers are foster families. As of 2018, they had 3,512, and out of that, they are taking care of 6,571 children. And then family type homes is 1,103, which are taking care of 7,379 kids. Parentage families is 81. There are 256 children in them. Patronage families. And then there are 51,224 orphan children under guardianship, so protected by the state in some way, shape, or form. Now we're going to switch over to the information that's a little bit harder to speak about, but it's important nonetheless. So I didn't know that there was a huge problem with human trafficking out of orphanages, but from what I'm reading here, that Ukraine has an issue with that. Trafficking of children, trafficking and sexual slavery are linked to conflict, which is true. Trafficking flourishes in environments created by the breakdown of law and order, police functions, and border control during conflict. And for quite a long time now, Ukraine has been under siege by Russia in the east. And it states here that homeless children or children in orphanages continue to be particularly vulnerable to trafficking in Ukraine. And this is an eyewitness testimony from a orphan graduate. I'm not going to share her name for privacy. She said children would go into the woods behind the building and disappear. Every year, 10 to 12 children went missing. We thought it was rapists and murderers. Some children were found dead, but nothing was done. And this one is, the statement is from a U.S. State Department report in 2014 on trafficking. It says Ukraine is a source, transit, and destination country for men, women, and children subject to forced labor and sex trafficking. So people are brought in there for those reasons as well. It's not just stolen from there. This is another statement that's shocking, so be wary. The doctors told my mother that they will take the child to be an organ donor in other countries and they will get money for her. If you listen to everybody here in a similar situation, you could just cry buckets. So from this eyewitness account, unwanted pregnancies or accidental pregnancies, there are people that are paid to search for people in destitute situations that will sell their children essentially for spare parts, and not a whole lot of things are being done about it, at least as of when this was written, probably 2014, 2015. Here's another short statement from an orphan graduate, and this person is currently living on the streets in Odessa. She says that how she survives is she begs. She looks for metal. She says that she's constantly alone and afraid that she will be raped or taken advantage of. And she also states that her friends who also graduated from the orphanage with her, they grew up to be sex workers, and they also collected metal. But then she stated that most of her friends that graduated with her from the orphanage were found dead. It doesn't say if it's a he or a she that gave this statement, but I'm pretty sure that it's a she. And then this statement is from the International Organization for Migration. It says graduates of orphanages are particularly vulnerable to many forms of human trafficking. They tend to be psychologically vulnerable and also ill-equipped to find alternative opportunities. So it's pointing at is the lack of schooling and the lack of care by adults. I'm sure that a lot of these children in the orphan systems, there's not very many adults to child, so I would say, they would be lucky to get maybe 6th to 8th grade education, maybe a 10th grade education if they're lucky. But if you don't have a family structure, if you don't have adults to care about you and to teach you how to take care of yourself and look for these, horrible, toxic situations and learn how to spot them and say no and get away from them or get help, you're going to become a victim. And it's very unfortunate that there are not enough adults working in the system to care for these children and teach them how to take care of themselves. I'm not by any means putting anything negative on the people that work in their orphanages that do their best to help these kids. I know that a lot of it is because of lack of funding and lack of oversight and care from the government, and that happens because it's destitute. It's a poor country. What needs to be done is there needs to be a lot more help from the outside world. This is another eyewitness statement from an orphan graduate from Odessa. This person said, "My friend in the orphanage was raped, but police never came. I met many orphans on the street who have escaped orphanages because the staff scare them." So this person's implying that the staff, take advantage of children, beat them, or worse. So they left the orphanage because they felt that they were better off on their own. This is an unofficial statement. This one's a little hard to read, so bear with me. It says, "There's a huge sexual abuse within the orphanage, even among children. Older children abuse younger children. Nobody is able to deal with these issues." So this is a push factor that gets children involved in sexual exploration even before they grow up. They're already used to the sexual abuse. So they become conditioned to basically become prostitutes and sex workers, and unfortunately slaves, human trafficking slaves. They become conditioned to think these things are normal, or this is just what life has to come, which is very sad and unfortunate. There's another person that states that I was raped and then I raped other boys who were younger. I don't want to talk about it. So these things happen and it's just pushed underneath the rug because it's not dealt with. These people, I shouldn't say, these children aren't getting any care either from adults, psychological professionals, or even a friend to talk to. It just happens, they forget about it, and they try to move on, even though you really can't move on. This is from a orphanage resident in Odessa. It says that they had fun there, skinny dipping, shouting, orgies, and all this under the windows of the boarding school dormitory. All the 5 years that I spent in the orphanage, every day a call girl came to the sauna. They pleased their customers almost in front of our eyes. So it's saying, from what I'm getting at, is that some of the adults that worked there were doing extremely inappropriate things, engaging with prostitutes and possibly worse, basically in front of the children, and there was no correction done. These people weren't fired, they weren't jailed for child endangerment. It just happens. It was just a thing. And then this is one person that was collected from the war zones, and their statement was, "I'm afraid of where they'll put me." So they don't want to go into state custody. They'd rather be out on their own. So those are some of the statements and testimonies that I read from some research that I found. And I'm not personally saying that, every single organization there is corrupt. I'm not saying that all of them are bad and have terrible intentions for the children that they take care of. These are just incidences that happen all too often. I didn't find any specific statistics on how often and how broad this happens, but the more I read about it, the more common it is and the less things are done about it. And I personally think that the way to combat these problems of trafficking and abuse is to, if there's a possibility, have these kids be adopted by a loving family. But, that's extremely hard. So then the situation is that you have to use a similar model, big orphanage houses housing kids until they're able to move out at 18 and hopefully survive. But the only way to properly do that is to give them, food, love, an education, teach them moral responsibilities, teach them how to be safe, and the only way you can do this is in an organization setting or a family setting with financial support. I know of one organization that is a Christian orphanage. I'm not going to say the name unless I have their permission, which I don't currently have, and they're trying to combat what's happening by, yes, they run an orphanage, but they're running it in Christian fashion, where it is more like a home, and they're trying to put these kids in situations that are better, where they can have better schooling, they get taught skills, they get taught how to, take care of themselves, how to understand situations that could be potentially harmful for them. I've seen pictures of the building, and it seems like it's in a lot better condition than a lot of the state-run orphanages, because they're getting funds from donations all around the world. They also don't just kick kids out at 16. 16 is usually the cutoff point where children are then told, hey, you're old enough to get out and take care of yourself. We need your bed for somebody else. And that creates a huge problem, because at 16, they're not legal adults, so it's harder for them to find jobs, especially when they're unskilled or only maybe have an 8th or a 10th grade education. Even in second world countries or developing countries, the people that are better employed have usually had, all their primary school, 12 to 13 years depending on their system. So it would be hard for someone, especially a 16-year-old with maybe only an 8th or a 10th grade education, to even have a basic job of stocking a shelf or running a cash register, because they just don't have the mental ability to deal with a job, to deal with money, to be able to open a bank account, to take care of themselves, because those things aren't taught in school. A lot of that stuff is taught by your family or older people around you that care about you. So tying it into humanitarian exchange, the organization, we currently don't have a whole lot of money, but I would like to work with and or partner with orphanages, other churches in country that are doing these things, that are properly taking care of the children, and I'd like to offer my organization's services, or our organization's services. I'm a conversational English teacher, so I could help teach English. I went to school for law enforcement, so I could help teach safety, how they can be safe in their judgments, how they can be safe just walking on their own. We can also do the basic things that a lot of other organizations do, bring in food, clothing, money for school supplies, maybe at sometimes volunteers that are properly vetted from the U.S. to go to the orphanages for, 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks and just be there with the kids, show them that they care, spend time with them, help them with their projects, with school, help expand or fix or build onto these orphanages that are doing things properly. So that's kind of my hope for at least this section of the organization, is to help with the orphan crisis in Ukraine. Eastern Europe has this crisis too. There's also a lot of orphans in Romania. But right now, with as small as we are, it's easier to focus on one area, and if we get the invitation or the opportunity to go to other areas and branch out, we will do that. But at this point, I feel that God is calling the organization to have our European base in Ukraine and then work out from there. So I don't want to take too much of your time. Thank you for watching this video. I know parts are hard, and statistics sometimes, they're just stats that go in one ear and out the other. But this is really important, and to me, when people see the black and white of what's going on and what needs to happen to make things better, they're more likely to give their time, maybe a few dollars here and there. So thanks a lot for watching. Have a great night.